You know, one of the best things about being asked to do my story was the fact that it gave me pause to look back at all the things that, you know, we all have stuff that happens. And we think, wow, man, that was a coincidence. It was good fortune. I dodged a bullet. But then you look back and you realize it was really God laying out this plan for you and making sure that nothing stood in the way. So I'm going to tell you how I got from point A to point B and what a long journey it was, and how really it's a miracle that I'm standing here. Literally a miracle that I'm standing here. My dad used to tell a story about his father, and he used to train mules back in the day whenever mules were used for farming. And he told my dad that to train a mule, the first thing you had to do was hit it over the head with a 2-by-4 to get its attention. And I'm going to go through, and there's 4 major times that I realized that God hit me over the head with that 2-by-4, and boy, did he get my attention each one of those times. I grew up in Guthrie, lived there all my life, all the way through high school. We went to a small local Methodist church. Everybody wore their Sunday best. Everybody came to church to socialize and make deals and gossip. And they had a nice elderly pastor who never said a word that would offend anybody. And he also never said anything that would teach any of us about how to live more like Jesus. And so once I got old enough to drive, I was out of there as quick as I could. My parents never went to church together. I don't remember my dad ever going. My mom went a few times with me, but most of the time they sent me to Sunday school. The church was only 3 blocks from our house. I walked to Sunday school, learned how to sing Jesus Loved Me, and came back home. And so once I got away from that, I don't think I ever gave up on God, but I know I gave up on organized religion for a long, long time. So what happened was, I started drinking when I was in high school. I was fortunate enough to be on a VOTEC group called Future Business Leaders of America, and I somehow got elected national president. I got to fly around in airplanes, and I found out that if you wore a suit, no matter how young you were, they'd say grace. Actually, back then they gave you free grace. That was a big deal. So I started drinking. I did really well in school. In high school, I got 2 scholarships, President's and Regent Scholarship from OSU, and because I was in the Future Business Leaders of America, I was going to major in business. Well, I hated majoring in business. When I'd been in high school, I'd started actually working at the radio station, and what I really wanted to do was broadcasting. So at the end of the first year, I changed my major and went into radio, TV, film. Well, my parents pretty much didn't think you needed a college degree to play rock and roll on the radio, so they didn't pay my tuition. Fortunately, I got a good opportunity through the Corporation for Public Broadcasting to develop public affairs programming, went all the way through college and paid my way through. The last semester that I was there, I was able to intern as a reporter at Channel 9 in the city, and got a job there when I graduated. Worked there for 5 years. And as I moved into that era, I had moved on from alcohol and marijuana to cocaine. And one thing that I found out was that when you're on TV, you get invited to a lot of parties. And you get invited to a lot of parties where there's a lot of drugs and alcohol. And I took part in that to the max. Fortunately, we were able to win enough awards for Channel 9 that they put up with me for a while. But finally, they got tired of putting up with me. And so they asked me to resign, and I did. I formed a company called Watt Concepts, and we produced a couple of music videos, most of whom were probably only seen by the band's girlfriends and their families. Produced a couple of records, which were also probably only heard by the girlfriends of the band and their families. I program music for clubs, train DJs, help them set up sound systems. And while I was there, I was working part-time as a writer for a local music magazine called Jam Magazine. When I've been at Channel 9, at one time there was a proposal from the Oklahoma City Council that they're going to outlaw all rock concerts in any Oklahoma City facility. And at the time, we didn't have the Chesapeake, but they had the Ford Center and the Civic Center. And so we were contacted by some promoters that did a lot of shows here. Obviously, they didn't want that done, so what had happened was we did a series talking about how much money those things brought in. And the ordinance that was proposed didn't pass. So I pretty much had gotten in a position with these promoters where if I wanted a backstage pass, I could get it in pretty much any show. And so that allowed me to go backstage to do some interviews for Jam Magazine. Everybody's happy. And of course, then I found out that not only is the backstage a good place to get free food, it's also a good place to get free booze and free drugs. And the security guards always look the other way. And so my addiction was getting worse and worse. I was staying up pretty much all night, getting up about noon, and my health was getting worse. I was getting sicker, and I knew something was wrong, but I didn't have a will to do anything about it. So I had gotten to the point that I decided, well, I'm not going to be able to do this the rest of my life. And I thought about, when I've been at Channel 9, one of the other things I covered was courts and crime. And I always thought, well, maybe I could do that. And I heard some lawyers say some really stupid stuff in court. I'll give you a couple examples. If you don't mind, a couple of examples. I was covering a murder trial, and a man had been murdered, and his girlfriend had been there, and it had been a witness. And so the defense attorney was cross-examining that girlfriend. And she said, well, and he asked her, what happened after your boyfriend got shot? Well, he pointed the gun at me and said he was going to kill me. And so the next brilliant question was, did he kill you? I had a medical examiner on the witness stand in front of the defense attorney, and the defense attorney said, how many autopsies have you performed on dead people? And he said, all of my autopsies have been performed. So, back whenever I'd been covering all this stuff, Andy Coates was the district attorney in Oklahoma County. And I took the law school admission test and somehow passed. Or got a high enough grade, you don't get a pass, but you get a high enough grade to get in. And Andy Coates was nice enough to write a letter full of a lot of lies about me that got me into law school. I guess that's kind of part of the lawyer thing. And I realized I couldn't keep up the same schedule that I had going to law school. So I had a friend of mine that had been in journalism school that was already a lawyer, and they were needing a private investigator. Well, in Oklahoma, you have to have a license to get a private investigator. You have to go to school to do that. So I went out and fed him a line about how I was an investigative reporter, and so I should be grandfathered in, and they gave me a private detective license. So I worked at this law firm as a private investigator when I got enough hours to get a legal intern's license. But then came the time to take the bar exam. Okay, I was not the greatest student in law school, and I was still drinking and partying all through law school, even going to night law school and working during the day. So I took the bar exam, and I was in a study group with 5 other guys. And I took the bar exam, and all 5 of those guys each bet me $100 that I'd flunked. So I really needed the $500, so I passed. And even then, after that, even after I got my license, I was still partying, and there was a lot of that goes on in the legal community. It's a very stressful job. Lawyers have the second highest suicide rate in the nation, first being doctors. And so, at some point, I went to treatment because everybody wanted me to go to treatment. And I stayed sober about a week. About 6 weeks later, I went to treatment again because I had to go to treatment. And I was helped with a group called Lawyers Helping Lawyers. And They coached me and encouraged me, and so as of June 1st last year, been doing so for 27 years. That was the key that really started changing my life. That was the turn. And I hadn't got the two before yet. I'll tell you about that. So, later I got involved with the Lawyers Helping Lawyers Committee. I'm still on there. I've been blessed to be able to help a lot of other lawyers, families of lawyers who to get clean and sober. So, a couple of years after that, I met my wife Misty. We got married. We wound up having two lovely children. Both are here today. There you go. Back to the religious part of it. I knew from being in a 12-step program that I needed to have a spiritual life. I knew that I needed something more in addition to going to the meetings. And so Misty and I went to try. We decided we were going to start going back to church. Been a long, long time. And so we went to a very traditional, big, basic church. I don't know what I mean by basic church, but you guys probably had an idea. The first time that we went, most of the discussion was replacing the stained glass windows and how much your donation had to be to get a certain size window with your name on it. So, and I sat there, and I know this felt ridiculous, but I felt like everybody in there was looking at me and knew exactly what my past was and was judging me for that. And I never went back. But I still knew I needed some type of spiritual thing in my life that was more than what I was getting from just the meetings. So I tried everything. That was back in the days whenever the Beatles were going to India to study meditation. So I found in Oklahoma City a teacher for transcendental meditation. And I figured if it was good enough for the Beatles, it would be okay for me. So I signed up, paid a bunch of money, and studied that, learned to do that. Still wasn't there. I went to sweat lodges, drum circles, all kinds of things. But I still never found what I was looking for. And so I was looking in the Gazette one day, and I saw an ad in there for meditation classes. And it was at the Buddhist temple out in Forest Park. And so I went out there, and I started studying Zen meditation. And I will tell you that I'm so grateful that I went through that part of my life. I think all these different things, God guided me through. God was teaching me lessons. God was equipping me for what was part of His plan for me. So one of the most amazing things was that this was a completely Vietnamese temple. The only people that were Americans there were about 12 of us that actually attended a meditation class with a gentleman by the name of Kevin Kim, and we learned various types of Zen meditation. And I can tell you that if you really want to ever do some interesting things, take a look at the Ten Commandments and then look at what the Buddhists call the Eightfold Path. Or get a book called Buddha and Jesus and compare some of the sayings that they say. And it's going to kind of boggle your mind at how similar those paths were. But the one thing that was different there, I didn't feel like I was being judged. Even though we were Americans, they were Vietnamese, they welcomed us into their temple, they fed us, they took care of us, and I felt a compassion that I hadn't felt in that traditional American church. So I did that. I continued to study there. I went out there and did Zen meditation every Sunday. Our kids were getting older, and Misty said, well, we need to start, I really want the kids to start going to church. So we started going to Life Church. And I'd get up in the morning and go lead Zen meditation and then come back to go to Life Church. It sounds kind of odd, but I did that for a long time. And I was content with that. So one Sunday morning, we were at Life Church, and the message was on Malachi 3:10, bring the whole tithe into the storehouse. And Pastor Craig pointed out that was the only place in the Bible that God says, test me on this. So they had this deal, okay, that if you donated and then you didn't see some miracle in your financial life the next week, you'd get your money back. Okay? So thinking like a lawyer, I not only fill out the slip with my name, I put my address, zip code, phone number, email on there because I was going to get my money back. Now I can pass this up, money back guarantee. That week, our business had the highest gross that we had since we formed the law firm. 2 of 4 over. Yes. So I couldn't believe it. It really scared me, is what it did. And I went back to the temple, and the monk there was this wonderful Buddhist monk. He didn't speak any English. He could have been 80 or he could have been 120. But through my teacher, I explained to him why I was not going to be coming back there anymore. And I remember that he told me through the translator, he said, when we're children, we follow the faith of our family, but when we become adults, we follow the faith of our hearts. And it was the only time that I ever saw him speak English, and he bowed and he said, I hope you find peace. So we were going to the Life Church regularly. I got involved in the men's group there, and some of the guys in the men's group invited me to go to a Promise Keepers conference down in Dallas at the Union Arena. And I went down there, and part of what they used to do at a lot of the Promise Keepers conferences was they had a guy by the name of Joe White who had founded Kanakuk Camp. And he did this presentation where, while he was preaching, he built a full-size cross. I mean, like with a hammer and nails, built it right there in the arena. And then they stood that cross up, and they put it on the stage, and then they did their altar call using it. And so it had been so long that I came down and I gave myself back to Christ. It's a miracle that God let me ever be here. It's a miracle that I didn't die in a car wreck, or from a drug overdose, or from getting killed for being in the wrong place at the wrong time. And so when I went back, I was baptized again. The first time I'd been baptized since I was a child. And I got more and more involved in the church and more involved in Promise Keepers. And the one problem was that at that time, almost all of my entire legal practice was mostly criminal law. And I started questioning, how could I be a Christian and represent these people? Now, when I look back and hear myself say that today, it sounds ridiculous. But at the time, I was thinking about, I've got to go do some other kind of law, but I didn't really know how to do anything else. I'd never written a will or done a trust or drawn a contract. I represented people in criminal court. And I even thought about just finding something totally different to do. And so I'd gone to a couple of Promise Keepers conferences since then, and I was really struggling with this. And there was a man at Life Church who was kind of in charge of like the liaison of the Promise Keepers, a guy named Van Corson. And one day Van called me, he says, listen, he says, I've got this guy and he's in the Oklahoma County Jail. I want you to go down and talk to him. And I said, okay, well, what's the deal? He said, well, he got arrested on a warrant out of Colorado, and, I don't know the whole story, but I need you to go down and see him. And of course, at this time, the last thing I was wanting was another criminal case. So I said, well, I'm not licensed in Colorado, I don't know anything about Colorado law, I don't think I can really help it. And Van wasn't good at taking notes. He said, well, just go see him anyway. So I did. And I went down, and I met this guy. His name was Thomas. And basically, here's what Thomas's story was. Thomas had lived in Colorado, and at the time, Thomas's deal was to go out and rent stuff and sell it to people. Okay? Not return it. I mean, this was how he was living. This was how he paid for his bills. Well, at some point, Thomas had moved down to Oklahoma, had met a lady, married her, had kids, found Christ, turned his life completely around. But after he got back into Oklahoma, Thomas made two critical mistakes. Number one, he told his mother-in-law about what he'd done in Colorado. Number two, he got crossways with his mother-in-law. That's probably a sermon right there. So mother-in-law calls the Edmond police. The Edmond police come out. They check, lo and behold, this guy has outstanding felony warrants from all over the place in Colorado. So they locked Thomas up, take him down to county jail, and he called Van and calls me. And so I go down and I talk to him, and I told him, I mean, they're not really just going to let you go. I mean, you've been running for the law for 3 years. And I said, I'm not licensed in Colorado. You really need to get a lawyer up there. And so Thomas asked me, he said, will you pray with me? And he and I did pray together. And he said, will you at least call the prosecutor up there? I said, okay, I can do that. So I go back and I call his prosecutor up in Colorado. I think it was Colorado Springs. And I go through and tell him the story that he's in jail and he's changed his life, he's married, has kids, has a good job. And I go on and on and on. And then this lady in an irritated voice says, what is it that you want? And have you guys ever had God tell you to do something? And it's like, I really don't want to do this? Yeah. Well, God told me, ask her to let him go. Now, you have to understand the scenario of this to really understand how ridiculous that sounded in my head. This guy's been one of those guys that you see on posters that say, what up with the FBI, interstate flight to avoid prosecution? He's been a fugitive for 3 years, and he's sitting in the jail, and they finally got him, and God's saying, just ask her to go ahead, let him go, he'll show up for court. And so I asked her, I said, look, would you let him out of jail so he doesn't lose his job and give him 3 weeks to come up there and get an attorney here for a rape? Now, what are the odds of her saying, well, there were odds of her saying a lot of things, but yes wasn't one of them. And she paused for a few minutes and she says, okay, but I'm going to give him 3 weeks to show up here with a lawyer, or I'm going to be really mad. Now, I kind of cleaned up what she said a little bit. Actually, I cleaned it up a lot. But in 3 hours, she had faxed a letter, a release order to the Oklahoma County Jail. They let him out. He was back at home with his family. And he did go to Colorado. He did get a lawyer. He did get probation. He made restitution and paid everybody back. That was the 2 before number 2. Okay? But I was still struggling with it. And about 3-4 months after that, I went to a men's conference at a church here. And Thomas comes up, and Thomas was about 6'8" and weighed about 300 pounds. Just picks me up, and he says, I'm sorry to interrupt you, but I just wanted to thank you for everything. And then he left, and Wes and I continued talking. And Wes said, he said, the main thing that I really hate about being a prosecutor is that I don't get to help people like you do. That was number 3, guys. And Misty will tell you I cry over everything. But, when I think about it, and even when I get up here and pray, it's hard to not tear up at the miracles that God performed in my life. So, I kind of backed away from wanting to change what I did as far as practice. And a lot of times what would happen, the first time I'd meet clients, they would be in jail and their family would come in and hire me. And so a lot of times I never met them until I'd already been hired and went down to San County Jail. And in the county jail, when you're an attorney, they've got 3 little booths on the ground floor. And they're like a little metal table, 2 little metal stools, steel door, little window about like that with bulletproof glass, and you could see from one to the other the bulletproof glass between all three of us. So I went down to see this guy, and he's in deep trouble. I mean, I didn't usually get the people that had a traffic ticket or a DUI. I got the people that were in big, big trouble. And God put on me just the same as he had that day when I was on the phone. And he said, this man needs you to pray. Well, I'm sitting here and I'm looking at this guy, and I'm thinking, well, okay, the best thing that's going to happen out of this is that he's going to go back and ask his parents why they hired a crazy lawyer to represent him. The worst thing is he's just going to slam me up against that door down the end. But I asked him, I said, would you like to pray? And he started crying. And I still remember that he had 2 teardrop tattoos. Do you guys know what teardrop tattoos mean? In gay culture, you get a teardrop tattoo for every man you kill. And he had 2, and I was afraid I was going to be the number 3. Yeah. But he started crying, and he said, yes, please. And we prayed for his salvation. We prayed for his case. We prayed for him to go free. And when I got up, I kind of told him what we were going to do with his case, what was going to happen the next quarter. And he hugged me in the same way that Thomas had that day. But then what happened next? I went out the door, and they have to stay in, you have to go out first. But I slammed the door, and there was a kid sitting in the booth next to me, and he tapped on the window and he said, and I could barely hear him because of the bulletproof glass. And he said, will you pray for me too? And we put our hands on the glass and we prayed. And I never questioned what God wanted me to do from that point on. I prayed with men and women in prisons and jails all over the state. I've prayed with parents who asked me to tell my story about recovery to their children or to their husbands or wives and help them get into recovery. I prayed with parents and men and women whose sons or daughters have been my clients and have been murdered before their case is finished. And, God has a plan for all of us. And I try my absolute best to not do that plan. I didn't want to do it. I was scared to do it. I was afraid of it. But now I realize, going all the way back, that all those things were things that God meant me to go through to get from point A to point B. And, I would not trade the world for what He has allowed me to do with you and to do that work. And I'll tell you this. I'm not telling you that I get up every Monday morning and trot on down to the courthouse like Dorothy skipping down the old brick road and the wizard. When God gives you work to do, He gives you work to do, I believe, not because it's easy, but because it's hard. And you don't have to be a lawyer or a doctor or a pastor to do God's work. If you can't figure out what God's plan is for you, then ask Him to He'll show you. Just like He showed me in that tombstone. And it won't be easy. But if you're doing God's work, He won't let you fail. Don't be afraid. Don't question His plan for you. Because then you get, we get a Yes, it'll be hard, but I promise you that you get up every morning and you ask God to show you His plan for you that day. He'll show you, and He won't let you fail when you're doing His work. So, I appreciate the opportunity to talk to all you guys this morning. Before I leave you, I want to give you a little gift, and it's a prayer that I say each morning. And it's going to sound kind of weird about how I came to it, but it's based on quotations from 3 spiritual leaders from 3 different faiths. And I put it all together in one prayer, and I get down on my knees when I get out of bed every morning and pray. The first is from Mahatma Gandhi, who most of you probably know as the Indian nonviolent activist that helped India obtain its freedom from the British Empire. But what many of you may not know about Gandhi is that every morning for most of his life, he got up and read the Sermon on the Mount from the Bible because he considered it to contain great wisdom. And Gandhi said, help me live today like I'm going to die tomorrow. Help me learn today like I'm going to live forever. The other is from His Holiness the Dalai Lama of Tibet. And his prayer was, please allow me not to allow the actions of others to destroy my inner peace. And the third was from Mother Teresa, who said, let all who come to me today be happy and better. And so if y'all don't mind, if you bow your heads, I want to pray that for all of you guys. Dear Lord, help all of us to live today like we're going to die tomorrow, but to learn today like we're going to live forever. Help us never to allow the actions of others to destroy the inner peace that comes from being a follower of you. And Lord, let us interact with others today in a way that makes everyone who comes into contact with us today to leave happy and better. Thank you, God.